Hi. I was laughing. I looked at the note and I'm like, oh, everybody must be on Zoom or doing the WebEx. I'm so sorry. I feel like I should run up the hill and join you all in person.
Do it however you want.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Is that if it's just me and everybody else is there in person, I can totally come up there, whatever's easiest.
We have to run the meeting virtually to stream it live, so
Oh, okay.
that's, and I didn't know who wanted to be here and who wanted to do it virtually because everything works and it's I don't know how easy it is to get to these.
Don't accuse me of that.
Okay.
I try not to work anymore.
Okay, that's good. I'm looking forward to those days.
There you go. Yeah, right.
It's not as easy as it was.
It's hard to stop.
Oh, gosh.
All right, well, let's see. Do we have MIG on board yet, isn't it?
No.
Okay.
Let me check my emails. If they are, see. So Taylor Positivity is not attending today. Let's see.
I'll run up to the council one more time, just to make sure someone else is coming through.
Oh, there's Brandon. Hi, Brandon. We don't have you. Can you unmute, Brandon? We can't hear you yet. Not yet.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Howdy. We're switching our cameras so you can see Brandon and me. We're in the same room.
Okay, so Matt, you're there too?
I am here too.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good.
So I am not using my panelist login. Try this one.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's it, but let's tweak it. There we go.
So I'm going to start recording the meeting. All right, Matt and Brendan are virtual. Okay.
Are we ready? Can we hear them?
Yep.
Yeah, can you hear us okay?
Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, well, let me, oh, good, and Greg's just coming in too. Excellent. Hey, Greg, thanks for joining us.
Yes, I apologize. I'm a little late here.
No apologies, no apologies. Appreciate your time. So Matt, do you mind if I just do a quick little thanks and then kick it over to you for a bit?
Of course. Yeah,
Excellent.
I do not mind.
So yeah, I wanted to say thank you to everyone for coming, attending, taking the time out of your schedules. We really appreciate it. And that goes to everyone on screen as well. I'll try to rotate. You know, this is a really big project for the city of Westland. We feel really strongly that there's a lot of positive, I know, sorry. There's a lot of positive that we can, that a project like this can bring to the city, both economically and just as a community. And I really want to thank you guys for taking time over the course of the next, however many, we've scheduled 5 with the potential for a 6th meeting. We'll try to keep them succinct and be efficient with our time. But again, we really really appreciate the time you guys are taking. And we all have busy schedules and whatnot. And this is going to be a fun and a great project for the city of Westland. So thank you very much. So Matt and Brandon here in our lower corner there, they work for MIG. They are the consulting firm hired to help us with this project. And they're going to run this meeting. I think I've got a couple spots in there that they've highlighted for me, but they're going to run the meeting. And so I'm actually going to turn it over to them, and we'll kind of get going. There's a lot of housekeeping stuff on the first meeting, a lot of intros and what is the projects. But as we build, you guys get more and more. So, should be pretty cool. All right, Matt, Brandon, it's all yours.
Sure. All right. And do you want us to share the presentation by sharing our screen, or do you have it up? What do you want us to do?
Whatever.
How about you share your screen?
Okay.
So you can click through.
We get some volume.
Yep.
So,
So. Do it. Oh, but Matt can't see it.
this is the same thing that's in the packet.
All right. Are y'all seeing that okay?
Yep.
Looks good. It's in the right view, presentation view. Perfect. All right. We're just adjusting our screen so we can see y'all a little better and see the presentation.
There we go.
Oh, look at that. Okay. We have a big screen in our conference room that we're in right now. So like you guys went from a little tiny thing to a giant thing. So
Movie theater.
almost shocking. But that's perfect. Excellent.
Can you put it on full screen though? Because it's like still pretty small for us.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
no,
like a third of our screen.
no, that's my control, and
Oh,
that's because we have a
Sorry.
layout of
oh, that's you, full screen view.
yeah, no, we're in full screen.
Better.
You can just see their slides next to it. That's why.
Yeah, it's just because they are
Yeah.
they're in presentation mode.
There we go.
Yeah, is that better?
Presentation.
Yeah, we're in presentation mode. Sorry about that. Okay.
All right.
Perfect. Okay. Why don't you go to there we go. So, the agenda, Chris talked about it a little bit, but, oops. Sorry.
Still see it?
Are you all seeing the presentation still?
Yeah.
Brandon's moving things around amongst our screens. Just making sure it's all still working for you. All right. Thank you for your patience there. So we're going to talk a little bit first just about the working group's kind of expectations and roles for y'all. And then we'll do a fairly quick overview of the process we're going through and the schedule. Then we'll provide kind of a status report in terms of what we've done up to this point, what's coming up. We'll talk a little bit about the survey responses. We sent you that out in advance, and we're not going to go through the whole report. We're just going to talk about a few key observations or findings from that. I know there were some questions about some of the survey stuff from one of you. We can talk about that either when we review the survey responses or when we get to the project working group discussion and questions, Q&A, either way. But we have some thoughts or responses to the questions that were posed. And so Brandon and I are going to kind of tag team this. I'm going to cover those first 3 items, and then Brandon will talk about the focus areas, which you saw on the map that we sent you out in advance, provide just some photographic examples of some of the types of development that we're thinking about or activities that could take place in some of these areas, over the future. We're going to review some information from the Oregon 43 concept plan. That's a plan for improvements to Highway 43 through this corridor. So we'll talk about what that plan says about improvements there, as well as not just improvements to Highway 43 itself, but some potential improvements or connections to the highway from the areas around it. And then we have some discussion questions for y'all that we'll pose kind of towards the end of the meeting, kind of that next to the last item. But I would also say if you have questions for us as we're walking through this, particularly if we seem to maybe we omitted something or what we said wasn't clear, you just want to make sure you need some clarification, just let us know. We'll kind of watch the room there for maybe like a physical hand up, and then the folks who are online, if you can either also raise your hands physically or use the little raise hand function, that'd be great. And I'll also kind of rely on Chris and Lynn a little bit just to help us see if somebody around the table in the conference room has something to say. We can see you reasonably well, but might need a little help there. So that's kind of how we'll go through this. And I think the other thing we're going to do when we talk about working group expectations and roles is talk about getting a chair of the group appointed. And I think Chris will talk a little bit more about that. So any
Before we go any further, I'm still not sure if you all are seeing are you seeing the presenter view of the presentation, or are you seeing my non-presented version?
It's not the presentation view. It looks more like you're working on your desktop.
We'll fix that.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second then.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, yeah, we're not really used to WebEx, so I'm not really sure. Let's just try this.
So you need to share the presentation screen versus the working screen.
Right, let's just try that again.
So you keep the working screen on your screen and
Yeah, we have 3 screens in this room, and that's part of our issue.
yeah, I get that. It's like, what screen, where's my screen and what am I working on?
So we had it and then we moved it,
Yeah,
and so that's what happened.
Yeah.
So we need to reshare.
okay, now I think they're saying.
There you go.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, we shouldn't have moved it between screens. Messed us up.
Yeah, my apologies.
All right. Excellent. All right, any questions on the agenda before we move through? Does that sound good? Make sense? Cool. All right, thank you. So we just want to talk a little bit about kind of roles and responsibilities of the working group. I guess first thing I would say is just that, you are meant to be kind of an ongoing sounding board for the community for this project. So that's kind of your overarching role. And so to help review what we're doing, provide us with input, particularly at kind of key points in the project. So we'll meet a number of times and all those meetings should coincide. This meeting is more of an orientation than anything else, but also just to show you what we've done so far. But other meetings will kind of revolve around key milestones or things we're producing. We'll send you materials out typically about a week in advance. So of course we want you to come prepared to review and discuss the things we're talking about. We understand everybody's busy. We don't expect you to spend hours and hours reading things, but we do expect you to be prepared. And if you have questions for us in advance of the meetings, feel free to send those along. That's great. It helps us then prepare answers for stuff. We'll respond kind of on the fly whenever we need to, but if you do have questions in advance, it's great to get those ahead of time. So we will select a chair. And generally the chair will manage the meetings in terms of keeping the discussion focused. We don't want to put the chair too much on the spot today. So I think we'll manage the meetings today, but subsequent meetings, the chair will help manage those meetings in terms of facilitating or moderating discussion and just kind of keeping us focused on the agenda items, making sure everybody has a chance to weigh in on things, making sure we're all, being civil in our discourse with each other and making sure we're staying on track in terms of covering the things on the agenda. So if that sounds like a job you want to have, well, at the end of this slide, I think that's when we'll talk about who might want to volunteer to be a chair and get that sorted out. So, and I think just other things that, we're expecting from you, make sure that we're all kind of fully exploring solutions. If we have options or alternatives, we want to look at those in detail and explore them before we come to some conclusion about things. Make sure everybody, again, has a chance to participate and do that fairly equally. I understand not everybody always has something to say or is going to say a lot, and that's okay. You don't all have to talk exactly the same amount, but everybody should have the opportunity to do that. So that's important. When we are coming up with recommendations, ideally we want to come up with a consensus-based recommendation from this group, but that's not always possible. We're going to strive for that whenever we can, or we're always going to strive for it. If we can't get to that, and we're going to at least see what the majority of the group have to say about things, and we can always kind of write up, I don't know if I'd call it a minority report, but at least here are some other opinions or perspectives on this issue of folks who did not agree with this consensus or almost consensus-based recommendation. So we want to make sure that we document that during the process. And then I'd say, you know, if you're out there talking to people about the project, you know, you should talk about what the group said, whether that's your own opinion or not. It's okay to sort of say, well, I think this, but you want to be clear about what's a position of the group versus what's your own personal opinion. And then we want to allot some time for public comment. So I think we want to make sure, I don't think we had it on the agenda, but let's make sure we reserve a little time at the end for public comment. If there's anybody that's not on the working group that's in the room or on the line. And I guess maybe I'll ask that question now. Lynn, Chris, is there anybody, do we know of any public attending? Okay. So if they're not, then we actually don't need to reserve time, but generally on the agenda, we'll want to reserve some time for that in the event that that happens, and we want to make sure people are able to do that. So that's kind of my overview of roles and responsibilities of y'all. I think, you know, on consultant and staff's part, you know, our job is to bring you good, accurate, complete information, to identify options where there are optional approaches to doing something, to explain where there are those options, what we think some of the pros and cons are, or strengths and weaknesses are of different options, for us to, you know, incorporate what we're hearing from you in recommendations for the project, and just do our best to be good listeners, and help work with the chair to facilitate the conversations in a constructive way, and just communicate diligently with you between meetings and kind of throughout the process. So we didn't write all that down on a slide, but I thought I'd put that out there. And I'm just going to stop for a second and see if, first of all, if Chris or Lynn have anything to add to all that, and then see if y'all have any questions. And then, Chris, do we want to talk about a chair after that?
Yeah, I think right before we get to doing the discussion about a chair, I think I neglected to do a round of introductions and go around the table and let everyone know who's who. So we'll do that first before the chair. But yeah, any questions about what Matt has just talked about so far?
Yeah. Just have one specific question.
Yes, sir, please.
In terms of sending questions to you, is that you guys and Chris, or what is that? Who's that to?
I think you can send them to Chris, and then Chris will forward them to us. Yeah, just to make it simple.
And if
Yeah.
you can remember, try to CC Lynn as well.
Yes.
Lynn and I work in lockstep, so let's say Lynn and to Chris, and then we will, you know, distribute as needed to Matt and Brandon and powers that be, so to speak.
Thanks.
Yeah. Question. Any other questions on this slide and what Matt's kind of just gone over? All right, Matt, what do you think? A round of introductions?
Yes, that would be great. So Brandon and I'll start real quick. So Matt Hasty, MIG, and I'm the consultant team project manager.
Brandon Crawford, I'm a planner at MIG. I'm an associate on this project.
Why don't we stay on screen, Greg?
Greg Close, a senior advisor with Wise Real Estate Advisors in Portland, and we represent the Westland Retail Center located adjacent to Hidden Springs on Highway 43 and the Great Family Properties that owns that property, and have a good number of friends that live in Westland and are interested in the community. So happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Katrine, go for it.
Hi, everyone. Shatrine Craik. I live in the Bolton neighborhood. I'm also the executive director for the Westland Chamber of Commerce.
Anyone else on screen that I can't see?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah.
Actually,
Okay, no, we're clear. Go for it.
Okay, I'm Molly Macomb. I own the property at the corner of Highway 43 and Elliott Street. And that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Wait, we do have one more person on screen, Steve Schwartz.
Hi, I'm Steve Schwartz. I own Backyard Burger Company.
Thanks for joining us, Steve. Appreciate it. I know your time is limited, so thank you. All right, we'll just go around the table this way. I'm Chris Myers. I'm one of the city planners here and project manager for Vision 43 on the staff side of it.
I'm Mary Carlson. I'm on Arbor Drive in the Robinwood neighborhood, very close to Backyard Burger. Thank you.
I'm Dawn Meany. I am for the Robinwood Neighborhood Association, Robinwood member, resident. I live on Caledonia Drive, long-term real estate agent in Westland, and will probably be going to Backyard Burger Night for dinner.
I'm Spencer Crandall. I'm just a 2-year resident of Westland. I came from Northeast Portland, where I owned a retail store. And I am a business consultant now, and I do some business education and individual consultant for small businesses.
My name is Dino Taj. I've lived in the Western area for about 20 years. Me and my family, kids. I own a property near the bank. Glad to be here.
David D. Jones, I'm representing the.
And I'm Carol Bright, I'm on the Westland City Council, so I'm representing the council.
Rob Henderson, Robinwood neighborhood community member for 32 years.
Tanner Woody, Bolton neighborhood. I'm on the CCI. I'm sitting Bolton or CCI. I forget which one.
Not CCI in particular, but
it's Bolton.
it's Bolton. Yeah,
Okay.
you're so as a
CCI.
It's a great acronym. Just a great 3-letter word. It's a committee for community involvement. So it's just another CAG.
So we have.
Similar to CAGs.
It's just this cold acronym.
Yeah, I know, right? So just, and then I'll let Lynn introduce, but just to clarify, so we have community advisory groups, the planning commission, the CCI, the committee for community involvement, the sustainability advisory board, the historic review boards. We have quite a few of these advisory committees, which are made up typically of 7 volunteers in the community. And yes, sir.
What's the acronym that covers all of those again?
CAG.
Well, a CAG, a community advisory group.
So those are all fall under CAGs.
Yes, correct. All of which can be found on our webpage under the community tab, and you can see how many members there are, who's on them.
Where the openings are.
When there's openings for them, et cetera, right? There's usually openings because there's 6 or 7 groups, and usually there's about 7 people per group. It's a lot of volunteers. The point is, it really does take a village to move this place forward, right? And as Councilor Reich is here, I'll just highlight that council did approve each and every one of you to be on this group based on your whether you live here or you have a business here, and there's a certain reason why you're here and bringing your perspective and helping us move through this project. We want different perspectives, and that's the goal of the project, is to find out the community's vision for Highway 43, not just mine or Lynn's or Tanner's or whomever. We're really out trying to find a vision. So we're hoping to bring you the information that you can all suss through, and the data and information, give us your opinions. But anyway, so yes, Tanner is a member of the CCI. But I believe on this working group, I don't believe I know, on this working group, he is a resident of the Bolton neighborhood,
Yes.
representing Tanner Woody.
Yes. Yes.
And family. And that was one of the things we're trying to do, is not necessarily have every CAG represented, but have individuals from the community themselves in that way. So my apologies, but the last person to introduce herself today.
I'm Lynn Schroeder. I'm with the planning department, and I'm helping coordinate this with Chris.
And I think that was everyone. Well, look at that. Kind of feels official now. It's happening.
Can I ask a quickie?
Please.
Are there 2 of us from Bolton? Are you in Bolton? maybe?
No.
Let's see.
Well,
We-
Yeah,
Yeah, we
it's
have,
like key bank, physical all the property.
Yeah, the key bank. By the 7-Eleven.
So it sounds like a lot of Robinwood
a
folks.
lot of Robinwood.
Yeah.
We have Tanner representing Bolton. The requirement from the CCI and then that we took to council was that we'd have at least one person on the committee that lived in each Bolton and Robinwood. So we've at least covered that.
Yeah.
We just have a lot more interest out of the Robinwood Association. So Yeah.
I think Bolton has done some progress with the village. And that might have some reason, similar to other parts of 43.
Needs a little bit less.
Yeah, it
maybe.
needs more TLC right now.
Well, and Matt, I'll kick it back to you here in a second, but one of the things we are doing is we have 4 meetings with each the Robinwood neighborhood and the Bolton neighborhood throughout this process. So we'll be in the Bolton neighborhood extensively as we move through the project. Representation on the working group is great, but the reality of it is you guys are a filter for the community. So don't need half and half or anything like that. It's a fair question. I appreciate it. Okay, Matt, so we've gone through introductions. What are we at next?
I think we want to talk about a chair, yeah? Do you want to do that now, or do you want to do that at a different point for me?
Yeah, is there anyone who would like to volunteer to chair these meetings? And as Matt pointed out, you're essentially keeping us on track, moving us through the agenda, ensuring that we, don't go too far off the agenda and the discussion, and also keeping it civil, ensuring that people are being heard and that they have time if they choose to take it. Is anyone interested in volunteering per se? We'll get you a name tag.
That just called.
Yeah, you're out. I would prefer that it not be, no offense, Commissioner David B. Jones or Councilor Bright. I think it's appropriate to not have.
Same here.
Yeah. With all due respect, sir.
I'll throw my name.
Okay,
No one else's.
okay.
Anybody online?
No?
This is more work.
No, thank you. Just a matter of time.
Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, well, Matt, do we want to just do a quick thumbs up or?
Yeah, that'd be great. And can I couldn't tell who it was that threw their hat in the ring or raised their hand, okay?
Tanner Woody.
Tanner, awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, so I would say, yeah, everybody good with that? We don't have to be super cool about this, but maybe thumbs up. Either.
Since we know you so well.
Right. We go way back, 20 minutes, right?
What was that, Steve?
I said that's fine with me. I've never been part of any working groups, so I certainly wouldn't volunteer myself.
Fair enough. Well, I think it looks pretty consensus to me. So Tanner is now the chair of the Vision 43 working group. Congratulations.
Excellent. Tanner, we will, like I said earlier, we'll work with you in advance of the meetings. We're working on the agendas and just getting ourselves prepared. So we're kind of all on the same page about what we're trying to accomplish at each meeting and support you in your role as chair. So thank you for doing that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. So we go to the next slide. There we go. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about just what are the objectives for this project that we established early in the process. So I think one is create kind of an overarching vision for this corridor. And when I say the corridor, I don't mean, just exactly what the roadway looks like, but what the area looks like. It's a long corridor. It's several miles long, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but there are going to be some areas we focus on in particular, where we think there might be more opportunities to do sort of more things or focus activity, development, however you want to think about it in the corridor, because it can be hard to sort of plan to sort of improve everything at the same level. It can really kind of dilute the energy. So we'll talk about that in a little more detail, but we are looking at creating a vision, a community-based vision for this corridor. We want to make sure that we are engaging folks throughout the city, but particularly in the neighborhoods adjacent to the corridor. Either people who live there, people who use that corridor on a daily basis to shop, eat, or gather, folks who own businesses or property in the corridor. So making sure that we're engaging all those folks, as well as other folks in the city who, this corridor is important to them as well in this process. One of the goals we have is to improve opportunities for walking and bicycling within and also to the corridor, creating opportunities for people to live and work in the area and be able to access it more easily without necessarily getting in their car, but recognizing that people do drive in this corridor. And so we're going to need to address all modes of transportation or all types of transportation or travel. But there's a certain amount of emphasis on walking and biking as well. Again, creating opportunities for businesses to continue to thrive, expand, potentially new businesses, and potentially some additional housing in the corridor to support those businesses, as well as places just for people to gather. When we talk about the results of the survey to date, that was pretty high on people's list, was just places to gather, places to recreate. So that's important. And then ultimately updating the city's plans and policies to make sure that they are able to implement the vision that we come up with. So that means the city's development code, which guides or regulates how development occurs within the corridor. That means the city's comprehensive plan, which is sort of the policy framework for the city. The city has a transportation system plan, and we're going to be sort of drawing a lot on what's already in that plan to some degree, but there might be some things that we identify in this project that would represent additional projects that could get woven into the city's transportation plan next time the city updates that document. So there's a variety of plans, planning documents, and policies that guide how the city continues to work and grow and develop. So we want to make sure that those plans enable and help achieve the vision that we identify. So that's kind of an overview of the objectives for the project. I'm just going to kind of stop at the end of each of these slides and just see if anybody has any questions. So does that make sense? Any questions about that? Does that those sound like reasonable objectives to y'all?
I have a question. So as you're presenting, and when we go through the agenda today, will there be a chance to pose some questions that we have about the survey, or is this the time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to review some, again, kind of initial observations from the survey. And then, yes, that would probably, I think that'd be a good time to pose some questions about the survey. And if those are some of the questions that got sent out in advance, we have, we can provide some information in response to those. And if there's any other questions, we'll do our best to answer them today. There might be some things, if it requires us to gather other information, we maybe need to follow up, but at least the questions we got in advance about the survey, we should be able to answer. So I would say let's do that when we get to that point in the presentation where we're talking about the survey results. And then we will also have, again, discussion time at the end where we'll ask you some questions, but it's also another time for you to ask us questions. So, but I'd say, yeah, wherever you have a question about something that like we're talking about at that point on the agenda, let's just talk about it then, is what I would say. Does that sound good? Make sense?
Works for us.
Excellent. All right. So just in terms of the project schedule, we're going to talk through the major tasks. Again, not going to spend a huge amount of time on this. We also have kind of a more graphically oriented schedule that y'all can look at. But this one's pretty short and sweet. So we kicked the project off several months ago in December. We have been reviewing, again, planning documents and plans that have been prepared previously that help guide what we're doing here. We had a tour with kind of staff and consultant tour just to help Brandon and I. And there's another couple folks who aren't with us today who are part of the project team. Alex Doobie, who's like my boss, he's the principal in charge on this project. And then Kittleson and Associates is another team member. They're a transportation planning firm. So we went out and just, did a kind of drives and walk through the corridor to get a good sense of conditions on the ground. So we did that as sort of part of that project kickoff phase. Virtual community kickoff and pop-up events. So that's the online survey that we're going to talk about a little bit in a moment. And then Chris has been out, Chris and Lynn have been out conducting these pop-up events. So at different community activities and different locations in the corridor, they've been out chatting with people and providing information about the project, directing them to participate in that online survey. I'm just going to walk through this, and then Chris, if you have anything to add, go for it there. And then we're now kind of in this process of additional neighborhood and work group engagement. So the first meeting with you happening right now, of course. And then we've got a set of meetings that have been scheduled and are coming up in the next kind of 1 to 2 months. And we can talk about those in a little more detail later or give you more information if you'd like to hear about that. But we've got several that are in the works to try to get more people engaged and talking to us and just kind of learning about what we're doing. And throughout the project, we'll be doing that. So Chris mentioned that we're sort of scheduled or scoped to have several check-ins with folks in the Bolton and Robinwood neighborhoods. And then we've got some other tools that we're using just to try to hear from people throughout the city and from different groups. So that's just kind of happening throughout, but there's kind of a big push right now as well to do that. And all of those initial efforts are going to inform draft vision and set of goals for the corridor. So we're kind of starting to map that out right now because we have started to hear a lot from folks, but we need to hear more before we complete that. So that happens in June of this year. And then we start to identify, okay, based on that kind of overall vision and looking at these different focus areas, which we're going to talk about in a little while, what are maybe some more specific concepts or options or alternatives for things that can happen in those areas in particular that get at what people have told us they want to see improved or enhanced in the corridor. So we go through that process. That's kind of a big chunk of the process is identifying those alternatives and concepts and kind of visualizing them, preparing some drawings or illustrations that give people a sense of what we're talking about, not just in words, but in photos as well, or not just photos, but illustrations. And all along the way, we're checking with people and getting their opinions about these things. And then the step after that is a corridor master plan. So it's a planning document where we've identified alternatives and come to some conclusions about, hey, which of those alternatives seems to make the most sense, what's being recommended. All that gets rolled into this corridor master plan, along with updates to the city's development code to again, and potentially comprehensive plan if there are additional policies needed or revisions to implement the corridor master plan. That's when we're doing that work. So that's next year, kind of late spring through the summer, and then going through an adoption process with the city's planning commission and council. So that's a more formal process. It does involve typically work sessions and public hearings with those groups. And so that's scheduled for, at this point, next fall. So those are the main steps in the process. Again, I'm just going to take a pause there and see if y'all have any questions. If there's anything you want me to try to put a finer point on, we can try to do that. Generally sounds okay. And there again, more to come on all of these things. I'm just trying to give you a quick overview of and so this is the schedule, kind of describes the same things that I already talked about a little bit. Oh, this is the community engagement schedule. Excuse me. So this is kind of a little bit more on, when different groups are meeting. I think actually the top row of little diagrams is the meetings of this group. And then we've again got planned neighborhood meetings and pop-up events, kind of particularly in the early stage of the process, but really throughout to a degree. That virtual kickoff is what I talked about earlier. That happens early in the process. And we've got kind of an initial open house or workshop that's planned in June. So that's not too far out. And that's to review kind of this initial vision that we're developing over the next couple of months. So that's just kind of a quick overview of the engagement schedule. Now I will stop and just see if anybody has any questions about all that before I talk a little bit about the things we've been doing to date.
Yeah, just on the workshop, is that similar to what the community center one was? The community center meeting that MIG did up at the adult community center.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, we're working on a number of things in your community. So I was not involved in the planning for that workshop. Ryan Matthau, he's sitting right over there, was involved. I would have to ask him, sort of what the format was. I'll ask you just to tell me, and then I'll tell you if I think the format's gonna be similar.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know the answer to that question.
It is, yeah. It's an open house and it was very similar to what we'll be doing.
Okay.
Sort of that, you know, come on in and we'll have some boards up and do some sticker exercises and talk about what people want, don't want. So yeah, very similar to the rec center open house they had last week.
It was just a couple weeks
A
ago.
couple weeks ago, yeah.
I just thought that was very useful to help people kind of understand what's the plan is
Yep.
and contribute. It was really great.
Yeah, that'll be, what did we say, June 6th, I think it is.
And then you've also put in place an idea for walking pop-ups too, which is a little bit different, but something to even build that further.
Yeah, so yeah, that's certainly a concept. The first thing we'll do walking wise, and Matt, I don't want to sidetrack us too far, but the first thing we'll do is Lynn is actually organizing a walking tour with council and the planning commission. It's actually less a walking tour and more a driving tour. We'll actually be using the ACC's 15 passenger bus and kind of moving through the corridor, and then we'll head over to Lake Oswego and look at a few sites as well. Sort of work that they've done to take something that looks like Highway 43 in West Lynn to kind of raise it up to a more modern standard. So going through the logistics of that is teaching us a lot about what we can and can't get accomplished in a short amount of time on foot.
So we will not be a part of it.
No, it is open to the public, but you need to transport yourself along the way. So I really would like to do some walking tours. I'm just not sure logistically how quite to do it yet.
Yeah, I think, I actually have some ideas, but it'd be more like, okay, everyone meet at this place and we'll do this section.
Yeah.
And then, another time we'll meet at this section and this section.
So we're all aware that the sidewalks and we have to cross Highway 45.
I think that's why it's such a great concept.
Yeah, and going back to something that Matt has said from one of his earlier slides, one of the pieces of this project is stepping back and looking at neighborhood connectivity in parallel to the highway, so that you could walk from neighborhood to neighborhood without having to go up or down to the highway, walk along the highway and cut back into the neighborhood.
So I frequently walk from my house, Sierra, to the library or market of choice and back. And I don't have to walk on Highway 43 at all, except sometimes I go on the pathway in front of Marius Young and then down into the neighborhood. But there's ways to get there.
It takes a skilled technician at this point. We'd like to make it more broadly available. Probably some signage, which there's a wayfinding project starting. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to detract there, Matt, but yeah, I also want to clarify just for a moment, since we're just kind of getting going. One of the things that's coming up, and you'll see it in these slides about from the survey, this is not a project about the physical pavement condition or the sidewalk condition, or why is there a pothole here or striping there? This is about the land uses adjacent to the highway itself. Now, there is going to be a little bit of that component about the highway when we get into having our technical advisory group, in which ODOT will hopefully accept the invitation to be a part of, because I do think there's a larger discussion about pedestrian refuge islands, crossings, speed limits, things like that. But this project in particular, we're looking at land uses and what is allowed along the corridor. And then not only what's allowed, but where do we allow things to happen? Yes, sir.
And then also just to clarify, so when we're looking at this map and we're seeing specifically the highlighted zone and we're tagging into what you just specifically alluded to, if we're talking about transportation or walking, accessibility, biking, are we limited to only these zones? Or can we talk about being contiguous between these zones as well, if we are talking about these concepts? Because if we're talking accessibility.
So if I'm understanding your question right, we don't have a firm east-west boundary on the corridor right now. So there may be spaces where we're moving further toward the river than what we show on there, or further up the hill from what we show on there. Some of that will get highlighted as we go through the project.
But I'm talking between the zones. So if we're talking accessibility, especially if we're talking biking, walking, accessibility, are we talking about the zones being connected as well in conversations? Or are we limited to only the zones in our conversation?
Oh, no, I mean, we're talking about the entire 3.3 mile corridor, Lake Oswego, Westland border to the I-205 overpass.
But these are the areas of emphasis.
Those are the areas that we're showing as emphasis where there's already a little bit more maybe commercial noted type activity that would probably be good candidates for a more intensely developed area, right? One of the things that Matt brought up, or maybe Brandon brought up very early in this process before we were out and about as MIG had just come on board, was not diluting the product of having, say, a mixed use zone by doing the entire corridor, because then it's just going to spread out development like it is now. What we want to do is be able to kind of hone in on some areas that might be more appropriate for that type of development. So yes, it's the whole zone, the whole corridor that we're talking about. And we're just going to see how people feel about some more specific areas.
So there might not need to be zoning changes between these.
100%, yeah.
But that doesn't mean we won't be looking at them to say it's not safe to walk or ride a bike here.
Yeah, and one of the lifts that is part of our scope that Matt and Brandon and their team at MIG will do is write a new mixed use zoning code for the city of West Lynn. The one we have now is geographically bounded to basically, the Willamette Falls Drive Main Street area. We can't use that code elsewhere in the city. So we need a code that's going to incorporate what the vision, our community vision is, what people want. We're going to need a new code to implement in those areas. That might be in one area, 3 areas. We don't really know. The whole corridor possibly. More will be revealed as we get out and about in the community. And that's some of the information you guys will start to see as it comes through and give us feedback on. So yeah, I just want to be really clear. Potholes and cracked sidewalks, although they have a part in this, are not part of this project in particular. We want to focus our efforts and emphasis on the land use and allowable uses and what the community wants.
Yeah, creating spaces you want.
Right.
Yeah, and again, connections to the corridor and within the corridor are important. So
yes, thank you, Matt. Thank you. Great point, Councilor.
But is it also safe to say that once these changes begin to take place, that there's a chance that ODOT might look more favorably along Highway 43?
Yeah, and you're right. And we recently met, and I think Metro Councilor Christine Lewis is going to be joining us. She is going to be attending our working group meetings as a non-voting member, but the region is very interested in our work that we're doing here. We have a long history of sort of not engaging at a regional level here in West Lynn. I'm just trying to be polite about it. It is what it is. But we met with Councilor Reich and myself and Mayor Bielostowski and Lynn. We met with Metro Councilor Lewis a week ago, and Metro is showing a lot of interest in our corridor and what we're doing. And the big trick about going out to getting funding, whether it be federal, state, or regional funding, is you better have a plan before you ask for some money to go do something. You can't just say, well, we want to do some cool stuff in the corridor. Can you give us $5 million? They want to know exactly what you're doing. So we're in step 1 now. What's our vision? Then we'll get the code and the plan put together for that vision. And then we can start going out and looking for funding mechanisms to help make some of that come forward. So, Councilor Lewis is going to join us here in a bit.
So you have these little circles that are highlighted on here, and these are private properties along here. So are you hoping that with the zoning changes, these landowners will then decide to do something with their properties?
Not necessarily. Let me see. I just want to make sure we're looking at the same thing.
We want.
And I will say we are going to talk about those areas, and we're going to talk about what types of opportunities we're thinking about kind of later in the agenda. So I don't want to squash the conversation, but I also want
to table that till later.
Yeah, we'll table that.
Get to that point.
The only thing, and Matt, I'm going to kick it back to you. The only thing I'll say on top of that, Dawn, is when zoning changes occur, it requires the property owner to do nothing at that time.
Right.
They can continue to use the property in perpetuity as it is at that time.
Yeah.
It opens up opportunity in the future if you wanted to do something different.
Right, but we're not expecting.
There's no forced
immediate
change.
right?
No, there's no forced change on anyone.
Eminent
The
domain.
zone may change. Someone lives in a residential home and we change the code to general commercial. It can continue as a single family home in perpetuity. So no one gets forced. They don't have to do something. So just to be clear on
That's not
that.
a touchy subject to problem with.
What's that?
Oh, getting eminent domain.
I've already heard.
Yeah, I just, sorry, I would throw it out there.
Yeah, so again, I mean, I don't want to get too far off track, Matt, but I think some of these topics are good to address. Eminent domain is a very difficult and legal intensive process of the community or the government taking property and paying someone the market value for it. But you have to show, there's a very high bar to show it's for the community good to do so, not just because we want it. It's not about, well, we need developers to be able to make more money. It's not that at all. It's more like, yeah, that garbage dump in the neighborhood is toxic and hurting people. And for the community's good, we're going to basically condemn the property and take it and pay them market value. So this is how we have to be careful about sort of some of those maybe not so accurate rumors starting. No one's taking anything from anyone. We are trying to open up the possibilities for 43, not take from people. Now, there are some frontage roads that might come into play. There are some historic landmarks, 9 of them in the corridor that we'll be aware of as we move through the process. But no one's out to take anything. This is about what do we as a community want Highway 43 to look like and act like in the future for our children's future and their children's future. Some of this, I won't live long enough to see, you know, and I plan on living a little bit longer anyway. So this is meant to be a positive approach to saying, what do we all as 27,000 of us want to do? And also the other piece of this is an economic hint here is that, you know, we get about 40,000 car trips a day on Highway 43. Not enough of those are stopping at Steve's business. Not enough of those are stopping at our local businesses. We're not capturing the economic value of that. So how do we make places that people both want to go here as a community to eat? But then how do we get people to stop their car and spend a little money in West Lynn as they pass through every day and not just at Chevron? No offense to the owners of Chevron, right? But we need people to stop and buy some burgers from Steve or buy whatever it happens, some yarn at the yarn shop or whatever, you know. So sorry to get off on a tangent there, Matt, but I really think we need to make sure we can talk about it's not a road project. No one that I know of is getting condemned. That's a huge process. And any zoning changes that happen don't require the current property owner to change what they do right now. It just opens up future possibilities.
But I would also add that the group here, what we're hoping to get from you is some imagination of what do we just want it to be a strip mall road for the next 50 years? What do we want it to be? It can actually be so much more if we get out of, don't change the zoning, don't change this, don't change that. If we get out of that, don't do this and think about what we can do, then it can be a pretty nice place.
Yeah.
With a lot of value to the city.
That's right. That's right. And I keep coming back to the question of how do we like it now? So if now isn't great and we can do better, well, now is the time to start doing that. If we love the way it is now, well, then let's just shut this down. Kick the money over to another project and move on with our lives. But I don't think it functions like it can for West Lynn in a positive. It doesn't mean the whole place is bad.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing if we had a more pedestrian-friendly environment around Backyard Burger with maybe places for people to hang out, I'm guessing Steve would see an uptick in business. That probably wouldn't hurt his feelings.
Hey, Chris.
What's that?
You're on a roll, and I want to interrupt you, but I have seen a couple of hands up on the screen.
Oh, my apologies. Can't see those here. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's why I'm interrupting. So I know Steve.
Please interrupt. I can go on and on. So go for it, guys. What do you got?
Yeah, so maybe just check in on the folks on the screen and see if they have any questions they had that they haven't gotten to ask yet.
Yeah, please. Questions, guys? Comments?
I had hand raised because I wasn't clear on if the reference to sub-districts was the focus areas that came out in the documents, but I think that's been answered.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Okay, go ahead, Matt. Oh,
Oh, I just wanted to interject, when you're talking about getting more cars to stop at businesses like mine. The signage requirements that Westland has could be very onerous. Visibility is my biggest issue. And not being able to have any signage more than 18 inches away from my building, any illuminated signage, is a huge burden on my visibility.
It's a great point, and I think it's worth noting, and I think that's a good discussion to have, because you're right. I know it well, and yes, I have nothing to say that I can't defend it. You're right. Can't defend it. So anyway, I didn't want to take us too far off track, but I think it's good for us as a group to have a little bit of idea of what parameters are we working with, and what are we really, what is this project really intended to do? And I think the other thing is, like, not everyone's gonna want change. That's okay.
We're all younger.
But I will say, so far the response when I've been out in the community has been strong, that it's about time we're trying something, and it's time to kind of rise up a little bit. So that's exciting.
Can I just
Mary, please.
make one comment? I hope to overcome this mental obstacle that I have in my brain, which is, please don't slow traffic down any more than it's already slowed down, because now it's a 45-minute drive for me to get the Arch Bridge from where I live, which is on the border of Lake Oswego. So the thought of slowing down to buy burgers, slowing down to buy, I don't understand how, unless there's an alternative to getting from Portland to Oregon City, how we can improve this highway. It's the only route. Are we gonna put more bridges over the Willamette? This is what I'm really having a problem with. And so
Well, if we get more of the
enhance-
people pulled over to eat burgers, then the traffic will speed up. Right? So there we go.
So I think there's a couple pieces, and we can keep diving into this.
Yeah.
There's a couple pieces, and I'll take a minute and then go. But number one, right now, Highway 43, at least for me and my family, operates as we drive to one spot, do whatever we're going to do, then we get in the car and drive to another spot, and get in the car and drive to another spot. That's very traffic intensive. We're adding multiple trips to the highway in a very short period of time, just to go do a few things: dry cleaner, take out food, kids do whatever. So if you start accessing the highway through the neighborhoods, through pedestrian and cycling infrastructure, maybe we don't always have to drive 3 times down the road to do a couple things, right? So you're actually going to remove trips by improving connectivity. It's also about offering options for people, right? Transit can be a very a dividing topic, right? A lot of people don't like transit or don't like trains, but the more options that people have, the fewer car trips you're going to have in space. Right now, the real option for you to get to the Arch Bridge is to drive. That's about it. But if we offer other options, maybe there's other ways to do so, maybe that removes some of the car trips. At the end of the day, let's be honest, it is a highway. That is it. It's a highway. And it is going to get crowded, but we can work on improving the surrounding area to help with that. But it will never be you hop in your car and it takes you 2 minutes. It's just not going to happen. You're going to get 40,000 car trips there. They can only go so fast, so far.
We don't want them to go too fast, you know.
True.
We've already got, problem with speeding.
Right.
And going 45 minutes.
Before I kick it to David D, what I would say, Mary, is I love the fact that you're working through that. And maybe as we go through the process, something will highlight for you. But then again, maybe not, and that's okay. Not everyone's going to agree, and we'll just see how this project goes. Commissioner.
So I'm just backing up what you're saying. It's also kind of core to a lot of the reasons that people moved to West Lynn, and therefore it's kind of core to West Lynn's identity, which is kind of fundamental. And there are places where you can start looking at technology, not necessarily in terms of tech, like new innovations, but there are places that have been working on ways to solve this all over the planet. And people have been working in Europe, Northern Europe, other parts where they try to say, how do we solve this? And so there are models to look at all over, and this would probably be a good place to start getting on DuckDuckGo starting to kind of look and go, ooh, that's a horrible idea. That's absolutely terrible. But for many people, one of the reasons they live in West Lynn, besides schools, is it because of our vibrant theater scene? The move to West Lynn is that they charted how long it took to get to their job in downtown Portland. And the time that it took to get from the east side of Portland, Foster, was 45 minutes. The time that it took to get from north of Portland to get to downtown Portland was well over 35 minutes. To get from Beaverton, we're done talking about that now. But to get from West Lynn, took 15 to 20 minutes. And for people especially who are moving from higher congested parts of the country, the idea of a 15-minute commute along tree-lined, slow, a nice drive, that's calming, genuine, peaceful. Insert your analogy, how genuinely wonderful that is. And for many people that we've been in conversation with, that actually became one of the deciding factors of why they decided to spend stupid amount of cash to purchase a house in this zip code. And you're right, and the thing that they point out is the one dip in the traffic is the Lake Oswego stoplight. That's the one place that kills or creates the traffic coming in or out during commute times. That one stoplight is, if there's a backup, is the one in Lake Oswego. So your concern, you're not the first to wonder, postulate, examine it. So it is valid and something to maybe just kind of hold in the back.
So I do want to go back and reiterate that we're not fixing traffic. This isn't going to fix traffic. That's not the point of what we're doing, is fixing traffic on Highway 43. There's however many cars travel up and down that road. What we're trying to do is create placemaking in West Lynn. That's what we're doing, placemaking. So let's think about the place that we want. Yeah.
All right, so Matt, let me send it back to you.
All right, yeah. And great discussion. I mean, I appreciate hearing all these comments. So yeah, totally. That was great. But we'll just roll through a couple more slides, see if people have additional questions. This one I've talked about a little bit already, just kind of what we've been doing since we got started on the project. Lynn and folks there have launched a project website for folks to be able to get information about the project, to be able to tell us that they want to hear about the project, get their names on a project mailing list. That's a place where people can access kind of all the materials we ultimately produce about the project. So that's a really important way to just keep people up to date. It includes a link to the community survey, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. Our folks have just kind of reviewed all the related plans and policies that help inform this project and kind of summarized how they are relevant to this project. So we did that early in the process. As I said, Chris and other folks at the city have been out, but I think mostly Chris and Lynn have been out conducting some of these pop-up activities, St. Patrick's Day event, recent example, other events. And I mentioned the team tour of the corridor, and you all talked about some other potential upcoming tours of the corridor. Identified these focus areas. We've talked about that. We'll talk about it a little bit more later in the meeting. And then again, started to schedule these initial neighborhood meetings and listening sessions. And we'll get you more, probably as a follow-up, get you more information about when those are coming up. Kind of what the focus is for each of them, if we're focused on a particular geographic area or group of people or whatever it might be, or just, the community as a whole. So, but we've got a number of things scheduled and coming up in the next 6 to 8 weeks, I must say. Yeah. So just, we've got this survey up. We're not going to review all the results so far. From my perspective, really pretty good participation up to this point. I will say this is not, I don't know if folks have used or heard the word statistically valid survey. This is not a statistically valid survey. It's not meant to be or reflect sort of a representative sample of the population. It's possible to do those kinds of surveys. I will say they're quite expensive to undertake. But this is really just meant to kind of hear from as many people as we can. We don't control kind of who responds. And so because we don't control who responds, we can't guarantee that it's demographically representative of the community. And I think there are other ways to then identify, but we can take a look because we are asking some demographic questions within the survey. And I think there are some questions about that. We can identify how the demographics of participants kind of differs or varies from the city's demographics as a whole, see kind of where the gaps are, who's not being well represented in this survey, and then figure out ways to hear from those folks too. So I think that's sort of what I would sort of take away from just sort of the demographic issues associated with the survey. So I just want to kind of put some of those caveats about the survey out there. But I think, Chris and his team are doing everything they can just to encourage as many people as possible to participate in this, just so at least we hear from as many people as we can. And then we can be clear about, okay, to the extent people answered our demographic questions, how does that makeup kind of differ from the community as a whole? And we'll talk about that a little bit, maybe after these couple slides, because I know there were questions about that. We'll see if there's any other questions. But we did ask people, we're just going to show you a couple slides. One, we asked people about specific types of transportation improvements, and we related them to kind of a combination of different modes of travel or methods of travel. So sidewalks and pathway improvements, improvements for cars, improvements for bicycles. And then we also asked people about sort of improvements as they relate to things like landscaping, better connections to the neighborhood, safety improvements, accessibility improvements, and you can kind of get a sense of what rose to the top here. I think the highest rated one was sidewalks and pathway improvements. So improvements to allow people to more easily and comfortably and safely walk within or to the corridor. But improvements for cars was also pretty high on that list. It was number 2 here. And then the other things that were high on the list were safety improvements, and landscaping improvements. So I think just improving the appearance of the corridor is important to people. And then, kind of all the other things we asked about, not quite as high a priority, but a couple other things, a lot of people mentioned as well. So that was sort of one type of question we asked people. Go to the next slide. And then we asked people, if we were looking to just, as Lynn said, sort of create places or help enhance places where people just want to be. They want to be there either to live or to work or to shop or to eat and socialize and those manner of things. Like what are the types of things people think they'd like to see in the corridor, the folks who responded to the survey. So here are the things that kind of rose to the top were more places for shopping, eating, and recreation. That was number 1. And then number 2, gotta make sure I get that colors right.
Green spaces.
Green spaces, yeah, green spaces like parks and trails. So that's really important to people. I think I kind of mentioned that earlier. So, and then we also, green is
development, I think.
Yeah, is it?
Mixed use, yeah.
Mixed use development. So mixed use development, when we say that, we mean kind of a combination of places for people to live and shop or work. So a mix of housing and different types of commercial uses. And again, those may be restaurants, those might be shops, those might be places where people can, get their haircut or whatever it might be. So those were kind of the highest ranking 3 things. But places for community events and gathering was also kind of just behind mixed use development. So starting to get a sense of what are the types of opportunities, I guess, or enhancements people would like to see in the corridor. And we'll show you some photos of kind of these types of things, at least either places in West Lynn or places in other communities, and kind of get your sense of, do those things resonate with you or not? But that's what we've been hearing from the survey. There were a couple of questions that came in about some of the demographics of the survey. I will try to answer them now briefly, and then we'll see if there's other questions about the survey as well. So one of them was, there were some comments just about the demographics of survey participants and how they compare to the demographics of the city as a whole. And I think a sense that younger residents, not well represented in the survey compared to the population. I think that's true for people under 25, so not a ton of participation in the survey by people under 25, which is frankly not atypical for any survey that we tend to see. You've got to work pretty hard to kind of get those numbers up to something that's closer to how those folks are represented in the population as a whole. But for the folks in the 25 to 45 age range, it's actually the participation rate was quite similar to what that percentage is for the city as a whole. So that was interesting to me. I was actually a little surprised because generally participation in surveys like this, they often do tend to skew older. And in this case, they do a little bit probably because of the real kind of lack of participation for folks under 25. So that was one thing we noted. I would say also the participation tended to skew towards not just older, but also a larger percentage of people who own their homes versus rent compared to the city as a whole, and a larger percentage of people with higher incomes compared to the community as a whole. So those were the things kind of we saw in terms of the differences between the demographics of the survey participants and the demographics of the city. And then the last thing I'll note, there was a question about what's the percentage of households in West Linn who have a child in the household. And West Linn's got a pretty high percentage there. There's a lot of family households in West Linn. It's 38% is the number I saw from some fairly recent data. That might have changed a little bit in the last 3 or 4 years, but that's what the number I had was. And then I'll also note that West Linn has a pretty high percentage of what are called in the census family households. So that's 2 or more related people living together. You got like 76% family households. That's a high number compared to the region or the state or the county as a whole. And your percentage of households with children is also higher than for the state and for the, I believe, the region as a whole. So that's just an important thing to note in terms of, kind of the demographics of West Linn generally. So maybe I'll stop there and see if there are any other questions. Hopefully I answered at least a couple of them. Let's see if there's any other questions about the survey or kind of comments. Oh, one more thing I'm going to mention. Sorry about that. There was a question about, do we intend to collect demographic information in other kind of outreach activities as we move forward? I think that's a great question. And I'll say that I'm going to want to see if Chris has anything to add to this, but I'll say we haven't talked a ton about it, but there are different ways we can do that. And that we have done it and do it in other projects we work on at MIT. So we have some kind of thoughts about ways we can do that. And I'd be interested in, whether or not you all think that's an important thing to do. It is something we can do. It makes things a little more kind of complicated if you're either putting on the event or you're a participant in the event, but it's certainly something we can find some ways to do if we don't think that's an important kind of goal as we're out there talking to people to try to do what we can. I will say it's not going to be, again, this super scientific method to a degree, and not everyone's going to give you that information if you ask for it. So it's important to understand that, but it is something that we can look at and work on if that's something that's important. So now I will stop talking and just see if there's any other comments or questions about the survey so far, or demographics or any of those things.
How long is the survey going to stay at? I mean, it's not done, right? We're continuing
Yeah.
to allow people to respond.
Lynn brought that up earlier today, and we're kind of talking about maybe running that one through a month and maybe coming up with another one. So I think we want to see different iterations of surveys.
Maybe a way to try to capture some of those 18 and under. I think you had mentioned at one point you were going to the high school to talk to either the youth council or civics classes or whatever. It would be kind of fun to get people that go to West Linn High School or Riverside High to weigh in on what they think, because even if they don't live in Bolton or Robinwood, they probably have driven up and down Highway 43 through this area, and
high schoolers use that. I mean, they are market of choice.
Sushi,
Yeah.
Crumble, and
Well, and they head out because that gets kind of busy, so they head down and to senior taco and
Yeah.
7-Eleven and,
That's right.
I mean, lunch hours right after school.
So
at
that's
least
got a
the-
footbridge going up.
There you go.
Not a bad idea, actually.
You wouldn't even have to arch it. It goes straight. Like the road goes just like this.
Yeah, we're just going straight from, what is that? That's not.
For me.
For me, it's from 8th, but it's from 8th Street to 43. I'm trying to think of the road that's right there.
Elliott or West End?
Millicent.
No, no.
Oh, Milliken down
Milliken,
there.
yes, Milliken.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The Rosewood, Hollywood district,
Yes.
the Lloyd Center district.
Yeah, so we are actively reaching out to that sort of youth in the high school and trying to get that group to weigh in, that younger group to weigh in. But as Matt pointed out, it is difficult sometimes, but we're working on it. So definitely.
Yeah,
I actually have a few things, but I'm gonna start with the first one. One of the things is that when I'm looking at the survey here, one of the questions you asked was, this is related to office space. No one's gonna ask, say, I want office space, but if you had asked, do you want places to work? That might engender a different answer.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things I think about with this project is what are the economic opportunities for people? Not just living, but also having places to work. So I just think that's an important thing to think about when you're doing more outreach to people.
I kind of just added something to that.
Yeah.
One of the other things was light industrial. I don't think that was an option, was it? I'm not finding the chart right now.
It's not.
But that would be something to consider too, in my mind, is like having some kind of light industrial zoning.
Yeah, I
Which also sounds really ugly. It's like light industrial, what do we want that over there for? It's like, well, what if we had a place where it's like a shared craftsmanship area? You know, where like you could share tools, you could share crafts, and you could also have shops related to that. All in the same area, pottery, yeah, all that stuff, like, that was pretty ugly. Yeah, exactly.
in commissary kitchens and, I mean, this is why I got involved with this project, is that exact thing of creating incubators for businesses.
Yes.
And people who live in this town provide some commerce and some tourism at the same time. I think it's really important to think about that, so we don't just look like every other place. Okay, second comment was, I didn't, the survey responses from the business community were really poor. And I don't know what the plans are to reach that. So that's something.
So we have be doing an open house specific for business owners. And we're working with Alina Schnarr, she's our economic development coordinator here in the city of West Lynn. She has a Highway 43 business, what's it called, Business Coalition. So we're gonna be working with her and the Business Coalition to try and get feedback from business owners on Highway 43 specifically.
Thank you.
And that's actually, I think our, oh yeah, and Chatrine's involved, that's right, and Chatrine's involved in that as well as the, from the chamber in that case.
And I'm on the EDC. So I'm also a part of that.
Okay, that's great. So related to that, I had an idea about, like, you guys are trying to get information about the community. Is there a way to activate the business community here to just simply, as part of Vision 43, to ask one question about where the zip code is of the customers? So you can compile a database of where people are coming from to be at their businesses. That might also help to inform, like, are these local shopping here? Do we need to make this for tourism? Like, what is the commerce that's occurring? I don't know, would that be useful or is that not a useful?
I have my own ideas about how we can do some survey, and I think that's a great, about what we want to see in some surveys.
And it's not like, it wouldn't be personal information, it's just, oh, what's your zip code? We'll just compile.
I think it's an interesting concept. I've done that in the business before, as long as the businesses want to do it. Can't make businesses do that for us.
No, I totally
So
understand
as
that.
long as they're willing to do that.
Yeah.
Well, and if you're gonna include that, realize how much of West Lynn also depends on not just brick and mortar. Think of the large amount of traffic that are people taking care of lawns People taking care of houses, people doing house care, people coming in vans to work on people's pets. Like, that's something that takes up people coming in to do the quarterly, that house on that block that every 4 years, they're bringing all the contractors to tear apart their kitchen. So
I'm going to interrupt you real quick just to say Shatreen's got her hand up on the screen. So I'm going to occasionally interrupt you and let you know that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Matt. Thanks. Shatreen?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, if we wanted to think about asking, find out where people are coming from, not putting it onto the businesses per se, but possibly making like a window cling or a little kickstand that you can have at the businesses for folks to scan, like a QR code, scan it, say we're shopping from here, and say it is for the Vision 43. So have that be like a component from this group, but wanting to engage. And then secondly, we have brick and mortar, and then we've got virtual businesses. So you're going to get a variance in responses there too. So just thinking through all that stuff.
Steve?
Steve?
That's a great idea, by the way, Shatreen. But also, I have all that information on my credit card. Anyone with a brick and mortar company can just ask their credit card company for the demographic data. It doesn't send it to you in a spreadsheet.
Can I ask?
Great.
So are we collecting the business information for this stretch to determine what type of businesses that what's the correlation? I'm not sure.
Can you repeat that?
So
I think we were talking about, I'm sorry.
why are we talking about the survey? Does it have to do with what we're gonna do on 43? Just the survey here.
How does this
How does-
data help us with?
Yeah, how does it help us to create a vision?
Is that local traffic or out of town traffic? Not interested in that.
Okay, and I
Like
did,
how many people are stopping currently?
Right.
It'd be a nice metric to measure.
I didn't get it.
Yeah.
That's the.
That's what
Was the question, I just want to make sure I understand the question. Is the question about how are the questions we asked in the survey helping us create a vision for the corridor? Or is the question about the last conversation y'all just had about gathering more information about who's shopping or using businesses in the corridor? Is it the first or the second?
Yeah, the first.
Okay, so I think what we're trying to understand is, again, we're focused on a couple of different things in this project primarily. One is, as Chris said, the land use or the opportunities for change in what's in the corridor, whether that's more housing, more businesses, more parks or trails or places to gather. Those are all the things, the types of things that people can do with their property and that people can then use or visit within the corridor. So we're trying to get a sense of like what's most important for people in Westland to have, what types of opportunities are most important for them to have in the corridor. So that's why we asked that question, and our thought is that will guide a vision for the corridor in terms of future opportunities for things people can do in the corridor or ways people can develop their land or use their land in the corridor. And then the second is how do people want to get around in the corridor? How do they get around in the corridor or get to the corridor? Again, is it by walking or biking or driving, and which types of facilities or connections are most important to people? That will also kind of help fill in the blanks of let's call it the transportation vision for the corridor. So that's why we asked those questions. And if there's, the survey's out there, but if there's other questions you think are more important for us to ask when we're in other meetings with people, talking to people, I think, we're all ears, but that's what we were thinking about in terms of the questions in the survey and how they relate to or might inform a vision for the corridor. Does that get at what you're asking?
Yeah.
So Matt, I have my hand raised. to that narrative.
Okay.
I would really like to see other businesses that are developing, say like Cruise right now. Why did they choose Cruise instead of what could make 43 more attractive like Cruise? Cruise Way, yeah.
Like Sweet, yeah.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, it's getting a lot of development, it's getting a lot of traction. It might just because, it's the popular thing. But like, what is it that's attractive about that? And, just if that is an option, I would like to explore that. I would also like to explore what our community's favorite things that have been established within the last couple of years are, not just locally, but also within the metropolitan area. Locally, it's something like the garage, right? That's a huge success. So how could we get the garage on 43? How could we get other attractive businesses or zoning or whatever it might be than 43 that people like?
Great.
Garages?
And thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. I mean, those are great. I really like those questions about, what are your favorite things, either in Westland, or is there a place you visited that you think, wow, I wish, we had something like this in Westland? And I think those are great questions to ask people, especially at community events or, kind of smaller scale meetings. And I'll just note Steve's got his hand up on the screen too.
Anecdotally, I can tell you I've been in this industry a long time, and other restaurants told me, and other restaurant owners told me, 43 is where restaurants go to die. Westlanders don't adopt new restaurants easily. And because you have to get in your car anyway to come to 43, you can't walk here. They just get in the car and they go to Oregon City. They go to Lake Oswego, and now they go to Atlanta Falls Drive. So I was told by everyone not to open a restaurant here, that it was a terrible idea. That's why Cruise Way is being developed, and that's why it's really hard to get anybody to open a restaurant up and down 43.
And Steve, what would make 43 more attractive to restaurants?
As I mentioned, the signage is actually a really big deal. Our ability to be seen. I agree with the point made earlier about slowing down traffic might not be a good idea. But people going by at 45 miles an hour aren't particularly interested in stopping. But a lot of Westland views 43 kind of the way Milwaukee views McLaughlin. It's a pass through. It's not part of the community. That is unfortunately it's absolutely how much of the town. I was up on Willamette Falls Drive, very anecdotal, but I was sitting at a restaurant at 1933, and I mentioned I had a restaurant down there, and somebody said, "I don't go down there. They have a Walmart," and it's strangely much of how Westland views this entire corridor, and that's I remember 3 restaurants went out of business in my location in the 18 months before I took it over.
Yeah, that's pretty significant. And I think that's what, what we're trying to get our mind around in creating some place to make it a place where people actually want to go and stop versus just driving out of town.
Greg here, if I could interject. Along with Steve's points, just anecdotally, and I'll try to make this quick because there's a bit of information here. At Westland Retail Center, the strip mall that is adjacent to Hidden Springs, we've had a vacant car wash pad for 3 years. Katie went out of it. And we've been attempting through a variety of resources to market that pad for reuse with coffee drive-through or food or restaurants or a number of just a wide variety over in pretty intensively for the last 2 years, sort of post-pandemic. And we've had an awful lot of feedback from end users around that location and Highway 43 and West Lynn. And we've been unsuccessful with Chipotle and Taco Bell and others. And it's when you're talking about an adaptive reuse from a car wash to a drive-through restaurant or a different kind of commercial use, you're looking at a wholesale redevelopment and reconstruction, a pretty sizable investment in requiring some generally credit and reasonable rent behind the investment in order to make it feasible. And we've just not had the right feedback from the national chains and the regional chains. One of the chains, I think it might have been Chipotle, was quite interested for the time, but they're a business that have proprietary software that helps them evaluate districts and subregions around brand awareness, and it actually tracks sales volumes at different restaurants. And the proprietary software said they couldn't come to Highway 43 between the traffic counts that were not favorable against like Highway 99 and Tigard, and so on and so forth. And so we've fallen back problem to a car wash. But my point is what we've been doing with our retail center. We had Valvoline as an instant oil change operation go out a couple of years ago, and we repopulated that space with a group out of Salem called Enterprise Instant Oil Change. And we've had a long-term vacancy from a Subway, and we've released it into a Mediterranean restaurant called Greek Bites. And these latter businesses are, the difference between they and the regional or national change is very significant in my opinion. And we find that Enterprise Instant Oil Change comes into a new community like West Lynn, and they really come into the community. The business owners become involved, the employees become involved. They treat their customers like almost like family, and they're ahead of their projections, and they're doing a far bigger business in volume than Valvoline was. And they've got a community kind of focus to them, and we think we've got a new car wash operator that I think is going to bring the same community focus and spirit to that pad, as opposed to one of the bigger regional sites. To a degree, what we're finding with our little piece of property is we're having more success with medium-sized to smaller businesses that have a real strong community focus and commitment, and really want to know their neighbors and come in and acknowledge networking and relationships, so on and so forth.
Thank you. That's great information. Thanks, Greg.
Yes,
I was going to comment about, comparing Highway 43 in West Lynn to Cruise Way. Cruise Way was zoned for that kind of large commercial, and they had big undeveloped lots and flat ground. And it's been, I worked at Centerpoint in 1992. And the whole Centerpoint was already built, and then they built the part in front that's got the Starbucks and the Oswego Grill and all of that stuff. So that was a lot of zoning, which is kind of what we're talking about now. But again, it's going to be a slower progression. Just because we change the zoning doesn't mean boom, we're going to get big up and those big office buildings that still have people in them support the restaurants lunch.
Yeah.
So
also, if I might just mention, we have a really bad parking situation in Westland. And I think that It doesn't matter where you go to shop, you need park, you're gonna get out of your car or even bike there. Before we put another business in.
So I live in Robinwood. I frequent a lot of the restaurants and shops along there. And whenever I can, I walk. I walk to the Salty Island, because if I have 2 glasses of wine, I gotta be walking home.
So, Matt, we want to say hello to, I didn't mean to stall progress. Hi, my name's Christine, Christine Lewis, served on Metro Council, West Lynn, 12-year resident. Is super excited to be adjacent to this. I'm not a formal voting member, but at Metro, we have a lot of investment across the region in corridor planning, land use, transportation. It's central to what I'm working on. So just wanted to tag along as the conversation develops.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you, Counselor. So Matt, we're about 24 minutes from our 3 o'clock deadline.
Yeah.
We want to reevaluate the agenda real quick and.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, and I saw you looking at your watch a minute ago, so.
Just keep us on track and respect everyone's time. Also, I think Commissioner Jones might have a comment.
If I'm not seeing it reflected in the survey, and that's my own ignorance, one of the things I would kind of like to see, if it's here and I'm just not seeing it, is a more accurate representation of the people who are currently using the space now. And that sounds like that's probably not something done electronically. That would probably have to be something done in person, or putting the QR codes up at the bus stations, at the places where these people are congregating, because I'm not seeing the demographics reflecting the usage that I see of the people in these areas. So I would want to see the youths who are using this, what their thoughts are, what the people who are actually engaged in use, as opposed to the theoretical armchair observations, the people who are using these spaces. What are their thoughts? I suspect that the way to access them is in the physical space, because that's where they are.
I will say, this is also an interesting thought problem to have of if we keep doing things with people's feedback, are we going to keep the same that we have now? Want to maybe shift this to be future adaptive. There's a lot there. I think the youth council would be, a lot of resources.
But to answer, like, that's another way of getting to, if people are using these areas to commute for work, you'll probably find them where they're using. If we're talking about people physically interacting in these spaces, then we should person.
Yeah, I think point well taken. Yeah, appreciate it. I am going to move us along on the agenda, because like Chris said, we got about 22 minutes left now. And we are going to need to end on time, mostly to respect your all's time, but also because we have other meetings directly after this. In the age of Zoom, we can go right from here to Marion County. So yeah, and I don't want to keep you longer than we scheduled the meeting for. So Brandon, why don't you help us to the next slide? So we are going to talk just briefly. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but we're going to talk about these focus areas, just kind of where they are. And again, our kind of goal in identifying these focus areas was not to say these are the only places we can think about improvements, particularly transportation improvements. But these are kind of the areas we thought made sense to focus on for land use. And land use is a big bucket of things, but it's kind of how people use their property, what kind of opportunities there might be for some of the things people have said they want to see in these areas, whether it's more places to eat, drink, shop, gather, recreate, live, etc. These seem like the places where there's already a certain amount of that happening, and where you can build on that, and also where there are maybe some larger properties with some potential for some change or redevelopment, or whatever you want to put it, assuming those property owners are interested in doing that. As Chris said, we're not here to kind of come in and force change upon people, but identify opportunities for change and see if that's something that people want to see. So we'll just briefly kind of touch on what these areas are. I'm going to turn it over to Brandon to do that. Show you some images after that of kind of what some of these opportunities could look like here and other places, and then just kind of see what other comments y'all might have before we wrap this up.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So we'll cruise through these pretty quickly because just in the interest of time. But yeah, as Matt mentioned, we identified these 4 preliminary focus areas, and should emphasize that these are pretty conceptual at this stage. They're not fixed or anything, and they will likely change based on your input and based on community input. This is just these conceptual focus area boundaries are based on, as Matt said, just kind of existing opportunities for redevelopment, existing land use zoning, existing transportation connectivity, and also just based on our observations from walking tour and staff feedback on where there may be redevelopment opportunities. So this is one of the bigger focus areas that we identified. So we've labeled here some of the notable landmarks, Backyard Burger being one of them, as well as Starbucks, 7-Eleven, Walmart. And these areas, some of these areas around here had some vacant properties or underutilized buildings and underutilized parking areas that could be potential candidates for redevelopment. So that's kind of why we encircled this area. And it kind of spans from, I think that's Merrillhurst Drive, I think over on the left end of the boundary, all the way over to kind of the Presbyterian Church area. So that is one of the areas. Another focus area, this one's a little bit more concentrated and focused, but this was primarily around the West Lynn Lutheran Church. We identified this area for a couple of reasons. One was because there was also some underutilized parking area in the area, and as well with churches being more active in providing housing throughout the region. So we figured this may be a potential partner for housing opportunities along the corridor. Moving along. So similar to that last focus area, oh, sorry, you didn't, this slide didn't change for you. There we go. So similar to the last one, this focus area was also pretty concentrated in one particular area, kind of around the old firehouse station, which has some redevelopment potential as well, given that it's a vacant property and a vacant building. And there's also a decent amount of underutilized parking area in this vicinity. And this is the last focus area that we identified. And this one's already fairly well established kind of activity focus point along the corridor with the West Lynn Central Village and the library and the market of choice. But we figured this would be another focus area to kind of build upon and also serve as kind of a model for the other focus areas to emulate to a certain extent. But this area also has a decent amount of vacant or underutilized land that could be redeveloped or developed.
And I'll just note that this one's a good example of somebody talking about, not needing to walk right along Highway 43. You've got kind of this parallel, I don't call it a small Main Street, right off of Highway 43, where a lot of those businesses are focused, and is a nice kind of walking environment for folks without walking along the highway there. And so that's another way to sort of maybe think about, are there other opportunities to do that along the corridor where that's sort of the focus or what you're trying to do. And not to say we don't want to improve the highway itself or the facilities along there for people to do that, but maybe there's some opportunities to do that a little bit off the corridor, but adjacent to it. Shatri?
I was just going to say, I actually live about 3 blocks from there. and walk it all the time. And the only thing for me from a business perspective and tourism and all that, that it's missing is possibility of having stores on the bottom with apartments on the top, some vertical, utilizing the space, doing it that way. And it could be phenomenal because yes, we get all the students there, and then you also have the connection to the trails and different things like that.
Nice. Yeah.
And I have one clarifying question. Is the work that we're going to be doing here going to impact the new construction behind the library? Or is that already?
Construction that's literally 80% done right now.
Yeah, it's done now. That's, I mean, I'm just.
It doesn't, we have no impact on that whatsoever.
I just wanted to make sure that.
It is an approved project that you're in construction and will finish as it is long before we get done with, probably before our next meeting, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's for the best.
Yeah, I would say when we think about changes we might make to zoning in any of these areas or application of some kind of mixed use zone, anything that's already happening, that's already gone through some kind of land use application or zoning, application approval process, and it's already underway. What we do kind of moving forward in this project is going to have a pretty minimal impact on those things, except to the extent, that it applies to any future change or redevelopment of those same properties. But it won't have any immediate effect on anything that's underway now, as Chris just said.
So Matt, I have two kind of quick things. I'm going to plant a seed, and we don't have to get into this conversation now, but it's something that we as a group should keep in mind, is at some point we're going to need the issue and the topic of height is going to come up. Height is important, and I'm sure Greg at a future date can discuss height in development and how return on investment and height are a factor in how decisions are made on what is and is not built. And height, so height will become a factor or a topic of discussion as we move through the project. The other thing is, Brandon, if you go back, now that I've seen these on a larger screen and not at my desk, the very first slide, the very first focus area slide, I think we need to expand the sort of the red dotting to include Greg's property, which is to the south of Walmart. And the red line right now cuts through what was the Katy Car Wash.
All the way through.
Yeah, it'll need to go south to include the.
Yep.
Yeah. So we can talk about that later, Brandon. I just wanted to highlight it. I see now on big screen that we're just missing a little bit of the property actually that Greg represents the family of, or the business group.
Also on the left, there's Burgerville. It's one dash.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's supposed to be Burgerville or not.
No, but as Brandon mentioned, these are not set in stone, but as I see them on the big screen, we can start to see little spots that we need to expand or retract these from, but certainly noticing that, and a good call on the Burgerville.
I would take it all the way to Mary S. Young.
Yeah, too.
On both sides, because you've got some vacant land on
the 6 lots on the west side of 43.
And you've got some funky houses on the other side.
Some multi-family as well.
Lots.
Yeah.
Also Walling Circle, it might be zoned right now, but it's really would be a great place to, I think, open up in the future. Not today, but
the lower half of the circle.
the whole circle there, because it's borders 43 and those lots are
It
huge.
could be a walkway. That's what I'm thinking of, like actually for even the station, Robin Station. There's so much walkway potential there with parking that I think that could also be enveloped.
Yeah.
Well, that could be a great,
It could be
use area.
a very good multi-use area, yeah.
Brandon, I'll get this feedback to you, and we can kind of keep tweaking those going forward. And again, they're living. We're kind of adjusting as we hear feedback. So we'll do that.
Yeah, appreciate the comments. Yeah, as I mentioned, these boundaries will evolve as we get everybody's input. So yeah, this is just the first cut at it based on our initial observations. But
And if you could say really quick why that Mary's Woods area is not part of this, because there was a lot of commercial in it.
It's Mary's Woods.
If that's right over the border.
Yeah.
There's my
There you go.
I've only been here for 2 years.
Yeah.
There you go.
We're all learning. That's right.
I just raised our consciousness from the fact that we're looking at chains in around the neighborhood. I am hoping that we are not encouraging Taco Bells or additional, even Chipotle. I mean, Steve's comment earlier about, oh, your business is down by Walmart. And honestly, it is like there is a vast difference in, I don't know, complexion or whatever between the strip malls down by Robinwood and then, woo, Market of Choice, and woo, woo, Willamette Village. And I live in Robinwood. I do not want Robinwood to become known as the low rent district, but you get your $3.50 hamburger. I want to see.
There's also a need for that Walmart too. I don't mind Walmart, but let's give it a facelift. So
I think they are working on it.
yeah, and even yeah,
It's more parking.
but you can do some wonderful things, but still offer that. We've got a lot of apartments. I don't want to shop at Market of Choice every time I need something because it's way too expensive.
I used to live in
I like Walmart.
Asheville, and that's where the Baltimore State is.
Mhm.
And they have the world's most expensive McDonald's there
Yeah.
because of the taste. And it's a luxurious McDonald's.
Yeah.
So
One thing I do want to talk about is I do hear parking. However, parking is a big issue because the state rules are changing the parking requirements. So it's not, so we're not going to be going in there saying we need a lot of parking. That's going to have to come from the investors deciding to, choosing to put parking. in
My
those
thought
areas.
is just considering like they did at, not Market of Choice, but the strip mall in front of it, they have underground parking. And why not? I mean, that's, or even above ground, if the property is already built, as in Walmart. But there's no view there to lose, I don't believe. So if you put parking on top,
Fred Meyer's over on 39.
yeah, exactly. Then we're adding some.
It's about, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that when we are doing this vision, we really need to consider, because
The city will not be allowed to require that though.
no, but
Because
it's
of
like the
state
live
law.
work, you know,
State law. State law
scenarios.
will not be allowed to require it. The developer can choose to put parking or not.
Okay, good to know.
But I think ultimately, Greg made a point about sort of the difference between a more local, like the enterprise oil change versus the Valvoline, and they actually have the more customers. And I think there's something to the local businesses, and we're not going to be deciding what businesses go.
No.
That's just not what we do. It's called a free market society, and we don't get to choose whether Chipotle comes in or not. But what we can do is look at the land uses adjacent to it, create the vision, or the community will create the vision of what we want it to look like. And hopefully we are enabling local businesses to be successful in those spaces like Steve and others, and for others to want to go there. And I think, we at the end of the day don't get to be the deciding factor in what business comes to Westland. But to your point, if we can enable spaces that local businesses would be successful in, then I think that's a victory, right? And over time, we would see that play out. So Matt, we're down to like 6 minutes. So now you get to earn your keep.
All right.
Already, but yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, kind of the remainder of the presentation, I think, is just to show you some images of development. They're mostly a combination of commercial or mixed use or housing development in other places. Back to Chris's comment on height, we try not to show anything more than 4 stories. Even 4 stories, some of you might go, oh man, that's too high for Westland. I don't know. There are parts of Westland where you do have that development at that height, but we did try to kind of keep it to 4 stories or less. So I'm just going to cover these slides real quick. So this is just a group of images of mixed use or town center areas. Let's go to the next one. More of those types of areas. And again, we tried to show sort of a mix of different architecture types, from more traditional buildings to, in some cases, at least somewhat more sort of modern buildings. And so we're just gonna flip through this real quick and then just see if you have any thoughts or quick comments or things that resonate or don't resonate with you. These are just examples of different housing types. And we are thinking of, you know, in this area to some degree, more dense housing types to support, frankly, the ability for more people to live in this area and support the businesses that are in this area to provide kind of a localized customer base. So these housing images are all kind of 2 to 3 story attached housing types. So whether it's townhomes or apartments or things of that nature, that's what we tended to show here. Yeah. And then we've also got some images of just different types of public gathering places. So plazas, places with wider sidewalks or street furniture. I think we're probably going to run out of time to show you the stuff from the corridor concept plan, is my guess, but we can talk about it briefly. Next one. So let's maybe just stop there and just see if people have comments on the images. And in terms of the concept plan stuff, and these were our questions for you, you know, I think one, back to the questions we asked in the survey, what are the types of improvements you think are most needed? Related to transportation in particular, and what are the types of new opportunities, again, whether it's for housing, businesses, places to recreate or gather or walk, you know, what do you think is most important in the corridor? So maybe what we'll do is, we don't have much time left. I'm gonna just have Chris go around the table in the conference room and just give us very quick thoughts, and then we'll do the same thing with the folks on the screen, and then we're probably gonna need to wrap it up at that point. So, sorry to rush through this last bit. The earlier conversation was great too, very helpful for us, but maybe Chris, you wanna take us around the table there?
Yeah, I guess let's just start here.
So I'm Molly Maycomb. I am a business owner here locally in Westland, and I just want to say I've lived here and gone to all the schools here. So I've been here a long time, and I've seen a lot of progress, and I've seen a lot of things that were voted down in the past that I hope will come to fruition now. But I would love to see mixed use and live work all along the low side and that would be the east side of 43. A lot of those properties are below grade, and I think we could make a really nice area right there to continue the restaurant, pub, local, like a little community area where people could come and enjoy those types of things.
All right.
Why don't we jump across the table? We'll just move through. I will say, please email me with some of these thoughts as well. If you don't get enough time, just email me and I can incorporate those into a larger summary email. Okay. Tanner?
Yeah, my biggest thing is continued pathways.
Okay, so neighborhood connectivity.
Yeah, 100%. Even just for Marriott's Young, you know, like Old Rivers is a beautiful area, and integrating that into the Robinwood Business District, all the way down to Market of Choice, and even up to space age, Galaxy. Space.
I know it.
Yeah, that one.
Gas station.
I never go there. It's like having a connection. It's fun.
Yeah, Rob Henderson here. My thoughts on this is that Highway 43 needs to be incorporated in the whole neighborhood. And without ODOT here discussing these terms with us on a regular basis, that we're kind of at a disadvantage there, because I think that's the first functional part of this, saying, what are we going to do with Highway 43 before we can get on to what do we do with the connection sides to it? I look at, there's a couple things that we could do. Is number one is try to take over Highway 43 and put it into the city, like they did with 82nd up in Portland. I know that costs a ton of money, or can put throw the money back.
I think they'd pay us actually.
Yeah. Well, that's what they did with 82nd.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's a viable thing. And then to also look at what they did on the Lower Boones Ferry from Cruz way down to I-5. I mean, that to me was there's areas there that you've got big wide bike lanes where you can have a bike path through there, and they have. But, you know, in areas that they didn't even have an expert room, and they tried to accommodate those things. And that's, I think, what we're trying to do is squeeze a lot of stuff into one thing.
Council Brett.
I agree. I would like to see some mixed use. I would love to see redevelopment of the shopping centers, both where the Walmart is and the shopping center that Greg represents, so that we've got more village community kind with buildings up to the street, you know, with nice sidewalks and stuff there. I also agree, like the connectivity pathways from one neighborhood to the other, but like I said, I walk to the library all the time, so I kind of know how to get there.
Right.
Commissioner Jones.
Everything that's been suggested is very salient and has some brilliance behind all of it, especially the neighborhood connectivity and mixed use, also including one of the things that I've heard again and again from residents. Everyone moves here, and one of the conversations everyone says is they are so excited that they're going to start biking to work. And then they stop really quickly. Or they're going to bike to school. They're going to walk to school. All those conversations very quickly end. So anything that allows pedestrian traffic, biking, walking, as well as in 2013, 50% of the average American could apply for a mortgage and get any house. A report that was released 2 weeks ago, so far in 2014, approximately only 15% of the average American can actually apply for a mortgage and actually get a house. So, and it's because of one of the last slides, you guys brought up housing being allowed. The alternative housing community actually started in the West and promptly died here. So you have alternative housing types that are more affordable, cheaper, and developers have expertise in. Cob houses, Ram Earth. There's a massive interest in co-op housing, specifically among senior living, that would love to have conversations that I don't know anything about, but they are frothing to have these conversations. And if that's zoning, that would be a lovely thing to look at. Self-managed communities, as well, et cetera, as well as, very quickly, I heard a magical word that just makes me smile, trains. If that is something that could ever be in anything that allows public transportation, which would help make sure that it never slows down on 43, and that economic development is always growing. But those are just the 30-second thoughts done.
Yeah, thank you. Why don't we go to Councilor Lewis, and we just come down here.
Non-voting member. Maybe
I
not.
like your thoughts though, but Spencer?
Okay. I just want to talk about the housing a little bit, the mixed use stuff, because that is brought up the most in my initial conversations with this, was the imagination of mixed use housing. And I think it's important to look at the demographic of the people who live in the mixed use housing. Do they actually want to live in Westland? This is a very family focused town. And I think if people live in mixed use housing to be in their 20s, maybe they don't have a family yet. Is this where they want to be? That's an important question to make sure that we know this is where those folks want to live, if that's who it's for. Or if it's for seniors, that's great too.
Yeah, transportation to hipster Portland, maybe.
Yeah, they'll live in hipster Portland. If you're single and you're in your 20s, you're going to live in Portland. You're not going to meet your mate in Westland. So that's kind of, in general, I think. I'm assuming that. This is me not having data, but it's an important thing to think about what's in those buildings and who lives there. And can you just make it for families with co-housing, for example, and then that is attractive to people. So.
Back on there.
All right, let's gonna kind of keep us moving because it's past 3. And
we are.
get us to the 3.
Westland is 3 very distinct areas, and unless you look at that, we're going to miss the mark completely. You've got the hill, you've got the Flatlanders, which is Robinwood and Bolton, and then you've got Willamette. What Bolton and Robinwood has to do is exploit their natural resources, or what we have that they don't. And what we have is Marius Young State Park. So connectivity from Marius Young State Park down to like the burger joint and all that. If we can become the bike mecca, the walk mecca, the hike mecca, and have signs at show alternative trails and routes through, that would be something fantastic. Also get familiar with the businesses we already do have. Somebody said they wanted to get a haircut. You can get a haircut all the way down Highway 43. It exists already. There's enough restaurants. There's enough vacant office buildings and office space right now. Changing the zoning would be great. Maybe we have some more uses. Getting a bike path walking on 43 all the way down to the end would be fantastic. I walk it all the time too. I don't always want to go through the neighborhood because it takes me twice as long.
Right.
The other thing would be a trolley system that just goes from our little neighborhood down to Market of Choice and back, so that we can get all of these people back and forth and doing something very easily. The other thing is there's a lot of housing. Check the vacancies on all the apartments that are right there behind the pub. The new little thing that's over there by Burkeville. What are the vacancy rates on those? Do we need more of that type of housing? Yes or no? Are we bringing those people in? So let's look at what we already have before we go too crazy on what we need, because it may already exist. And it's just giving it a facelift and making it more attractive and doing it on a much more economical way. So that's my 2 cents.
Mary?
Well, I'm inspired, comments, to capitalize on the features that we already have in Robin and Bolton. And yes, Mary is a big one. But when I bought my house, sight unseen, sitting in my living room in Reno, Nevada, I was trying to get as close as I could to the river. And, you know, to get to the river, I had to walk to Lake Oswego through Maryland University to get down to the river. And then if I take a right, it peters out at the church.
Oh, yeah, or you could go to the George Rogers.
So
Yeah, I never know that.
if we could get, as Nick mentioned, you know, biking, walking paths from Lake Oswego to the Arch Bridge, I think that would be an amazing feat, but also connecting somehow down to the river, so that also becomes walkable. But there's a lot of houses.
Thank you, Mary. All right, so we've got Greg, Steve, and Shatrine up on screen. Greg, why don't you give us your thoughts real quick, and we'll just keep moving here.
I really liked what someone said early in the meeting, which was basically it's about placemaking, not changing traffic per se. And it's I love being a part of this kind of exercise. A lot of opinions, a lot of balance, a lot of perspectives. And when it comes to, you know, I'll just need to comment from time to time based on what we represent, which is the strip center property. When it comes to rezoning and additional density, parcels need to be understood by stakeholders, and the future potential of the strip center property that I represent is highly limited by an enormous easement that runs perpendicular, runs diagonally through that parcel, from the apartments out to the highway, and it's a very large no-build easement with a enormous storm system infrastructure below it. Economically, there'd be some real engineering challenges trying to do submerged parking on that parcel, for instance, or a lot of density. So we need to understand, you know, certain challenges with particular properties as we go. But I do appreciate the discussion and look forward to more input.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. Steve, why don't we go to you, and then Shatrine will wrap up with you, okay?
Okay, briefly, sidewalks, downhill and uphill from where I'm at, it can be actively dangerous to walk in this neighborhood. I've done it. It can be scary coming around the corners. Sidewalks are critical. And that answers the second one. Interestingly enough, Sourdough Willie's and McDonald's, both of those empty lots that have been empty, not really doing anything for years and years. This may be out of left field, but the city actually does lack daycare spaces. These could be, if we could find a way to encourage someone to develop one or both those spots, you don't need a lot of parking. It directly helps the families. And it's a good thing for the working families around here. And there's not enough spaces in the area. So just my 2 cents.
Great. Thank you for that comment. And Shatrine, why don't we finish with you?
Alrighty. Completely concur with the multimodal pathways on 43 and connecting in there. I think it's paramount. I also think that office, co-working, and possible event spaces. So if it's multi-use, but really working on expanding the opportunity for virtual businesses to come and collaborate. And then if we plan wisely and put them next to existing businesses, restaurants, different things like that, you've got support connecting through that too for use, and people that might have visitors. If they're bringing clients in, they can go eat close to places that already are existing. And then I would love for us to think of what we already have, so our waterways, our lovely trails, figuring out ways to connect these together and do water access and tourism opportunities through that, connecting elements there. I know we've got parks, but got something like that. So that's a much bigger conversation than I can just email about.
Great, thank you. Matt, it looks like we're good. You ready to wrap up?
Yes. Yeah, that was excellent. I appreciated all those comments. Definitely the kind of thing we were kind of looking to hear from y'all. So appreciate that. And I'm going to dispense with the next step slides because I do want to let you go and myself go to start my other meeting. But really appreciated everybody's comments today. We will circle back to you regarding next steps and subsequent meeting dates. But just want to thank everybody again for being here. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you devoting your time to this project, and look forward to talking to you again. So thank you from me.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you.